Do you want a financially secure future, not just for yourself, but for your loved ones as well? This is Generations of Wealth, the podcast that breaks down the most effective wealth building strategies you can easily apply to your own life. Join investor and international best-selling author Derek Dombeck in exploring practical tips and sound advice on building a profitable business, creating a powerful brand, or getting into the thriving world of real estate investing. This is your chance to create your very own financial roadmap to live your vision, love your life. Let's begin this discussion with your host, Derek Dombeck.
Welcome to the Generations of Wealth podcast. I'm Derek Dombeck, your host, and this is the show where we talk to great people and we figure out how they live their vision and love their life. So today, good friend of mine, David Richter, he has spoke at events of mine. We've done some business with each other, and I know many people that he's helped over the years. So David, I know you've been in business at least 10 years that I know of, and you were doing a lot of real estate and different types of creative structures and flipping and landlording and all the stuff that a lot of us do, and then kind of figured out there was a better way to actually keep some money. Is that a thing? So
Right.
if you wouldn't mind, just tell everybody who you are and
Yeah.
let's dive in, buddy.
Yeah. So I'm David Richter. I wrote Profit First for Real Estate Investing, but there was a long journey that got me there. It was the real estate world. Been in that world since 2012. Been a part of a lot of deals, like you mentioned, and a lot of different types of deals. And I saw that we were doing at our highest point 25 deals a month, but spending 26 worth out the door. So you make $1 million, spend 1.1, and that's no bueno. And it was like, I also figured out, because I was going to masterminds back then too, we weren't the only ones. So that's what kind of the catapult and catalyst there, the trajectory that I was on to write the book and everything. That was really where my eyes were open, that a lot of people make money but feel broke. It's like, okay, how do we get out of that cycle? So that's the journey that took me to where I am today, but that's a really high level overview without all the nitty-gritty details behind the scenes.
Well, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty details because that's what we do. This is going to be like a
Let's do
therapy
it.
session with you by the time
Yay.
we're done. We know so many people that get into this business. They start out just one or two properties, maybe a couple rentals, maybe they flip a house, and then they are trying to get out of the rat race, so to speak, except they really just bury themselves in even deeper in the rat race, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Overhead costs and everything else. So I guess tell me how you define the rat race and how do you escape the rat race?
Yeah. Well, and I like that what you teach is so crucial to because a lot of people don't get it. It's a lot of people just build themselves into their own rat race. If you are a real estate investor and you jumped into that boat and it's like you wanted to escape your W-2 job, living paycheck, kind of like what Robert Kiyosaki says, just living the same day over and over again. That's where in the real estate world, it's instead of living paycheck to paycheck, now you're living deal to deal. Even on the cash flow game board, if you've ever played cash flow, it's literally trying to land on the little green spaces to get deals out, so that way you can get out of the rat race on that game. So it's like it's the same thing in the real estate world. We're just living deal to deal. And then for me, what I saw that a lot of people in the real estate world, they have the make money skill. They can go out there and they can listen to podcasts, or they go through courses, or they go to training and mentorship and all that, and they can learn how to make money in real estate. And a lot of people get really good at that, but they usually don't get the keep money skill on with it. And that's where I believe that if you're truly going to get out of the rat race, it's not just more deals that solves it. It's more deals plus I'm catching the money on the back end. I know how to keep the money from these deals that I'm doing. And that's where I think where a lot of people just don't have that skill, and it's never been taught to us. Come on, like schools and like our training from parents and like stuff like that. Like we never get taught how to be a business owner, the fundamentals of business ownership. And that's where I feel like we don't get any of that, and that's where we fall off the track, and we become business owners and we think this is going to be the end all be all. Financial freedom is on the other side of me quitting my job, not having a boss. And then you're like, what the heck happened? Like I woke up a year later and I have less money in my bank account. Like, what? Like that's where I feel like that's what profit first at least solves the first portion of that. And that's why I got so adamant and passionate about the book.
So when you had this aha moment in your business, how did you figure out and what resources? Because I
Yeah,
don't think you have an accounting degree or a background in accounting, right? So how did you
correct.
start figuring it out?
So when I was in that company, I was with a company for 5 years where we had scaled to that 25 deals a month. And at the very last year, I sat in the finance seat for a year, even though I didn't have the background. I was just like, I want to learn this. And so I sat down with a CPA at that point that we had and just asked him a billion questions just so I could know what a profit and loss is, what a balance sheet. I was so green back then. I remember asking, what's P&L? What's the N stand for of P&L? And I'm like, oh, and he said it's profit and loss. It's an and. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then that's where I was just asking a bunch of silly questions back then. And then from there, though, that's where I learned just the foundation of knowing the numbers. But then through a series of events, I moved across the country. That company, I wish I would have learned profit first back then, but the company kind of blew apart internally. A lot of people left. I wish I had a happy ending to that story, but I don't. Because we didn't figure out the money piece, we all went our separate ways. And that owner's still there and he's still doing well, but he just has a team of like a few people now versus, the team that he had back then. So I moved across the country, started working with another investor in Richmond, Virginia, that I grew very close to, very good friend of mine, but he was a mess too. I said, "Show me your books." That was the first thing I asked him. I want to know your numbers, and he didn't have anything. Like it wasn't in any order or shape or fashion. So went in there and helped get that all cleaned up. And then from there, he just said, like, this has been life changing, just knowing what I make, spend, and keep now. Just knowing where the heck my money has gone, that to me was the light bulb moment of, okay, I've got to help people just get clarity. Then someone actually, as I was calling my mentors, this is why you should have mentors in your life. But this is why I called a mentor and he said, "Have you ever read the book Profit First?" I said, "No." Sounds like a great title though. So I read that book that evening, and I took 10 pages of notes and said, "This is a great framework for the cash management piece." And that's where then I saw it. That was when my eyes were really open because they were open the first time just by giving that one guy clarity and like, "Ooh, I could do this." But then I was like, this makes sense. Profit First made sense to me as an entrepreneur because in that book, it doesn't talk a bunch about the profit and loss, the balance sheet, like becoming a financial guru. It's more about leveraging some of the habits you already have with your money and just putting a better system in place. So that way you're leveraging what you're already doing around your cash and the money coming in. To me, that was a huge light bulb moment of like, oh, this speaks to me as the entrepreneur type. And I want to get this out and I want to start implementing it and see proof of concept. So then
Mhm.
we did start implementing it and saw the proof of concept. This is beautiful. That's when I reached out to Mike McCallowitz, the original author, about 8 months into it of helping people. And I said, I've got a real estate background. You've got the Profit First book. I would love to do one for real estate because real estate's such a nuanced, product out there with all the different things you can do with it. And he signed off on that. So that's how I got Profit First out the door. But those were a couple of the key moments in my life where I saw it. And now I've seen it over and over again with the clients we work with our own company. Like, dang it, I wish I would have had this back then when we were doing all those deals. Cause I'm like, where would we have been if we would have had just like a simple system like this in place? So it was through trial and error and one failure, like going through that to see, to come out better on the other side.
So playing devil's advocate, one of the listeners just starting to hear this for the first time,
Yeah.
I've got to survive today. I've got to keep food on the table for my family today, and there's no way I can take profit first. You got to give me more. How do you explain that to me? Because I was the same way for years and years and
Yeah.
years. And I mean, I would venture to guess, I'll make up a percentage, probably 95% of business owners, not just real estate. You said it before, you're living deal to deal, regardless of what business you're in. And then when you see any shift in your market, in your business market, and you're living deal to deal, but all of a sudden you can't get a deal, now you're spiraling. So I would be retracting. I would be saying, well, I've got to get the deals done. I've got to work more hours. I've got to, spend more time away from my family. So how does a profit first really work?
That's where I'd probably introduce them to the story of Joey English. I know you might know him through Bill Cook and other
Oh,
people, but it's like,
Joey and I are good buddies.
and it's like that's where in 2019, at the end of that year, he told me on a Zoom call, like early 2020, like in 2019, he'd done more deals than he'd ever done, but lost more money than he'd ever lost. And it's like if someone came to me with that rebuttal of like, oh, well, I've got to feed my family and I've got to just keep going and doing the deals, I would tell them like, we need to hold on a second right here. Do you realize what you're telling me right now is what's going to keep you in that hustle mode for a long time? Like, we've got another good mutual friend who says hustle is a season, not a lifestyle. And like, if you have that hustle just all the time, that mode, then you're just going to constantly be addicted to that. And that's why I love you have the vision coaching. You really help people extract their vision. And that's where one of the first steps we do in this process is make sure, what do you really want from your business? Okay, you say you want to feed your family. Let's take the profit first name out of it. If you're like, oh, I can't do that, it's more like, well, this is all about making sure you can feed your family. Do you know what it takes to feed your family? A lot of people just don't have the basic numbers for what they need for their household or
Yeah.
what they even need for their business. So the business isn't a big, huge expense suck on them. So it's like, let's get very clear on the first goals that we have and getting out of our own rat race, because then profit first is all about setting up a simple system with your cash so that way you can feed your family. You can pay yourself consistently because it's built on the envelope method. It's built on the method of I give every dollar a name. So instead of setting envelopes up and naming every dollar in envelopes, we set up physical bank accounts in our business for different types of things like profit or owner's pay to pay yourself. And if you're saying like, well, I'm living the deal right now and I'm in this rat race, there's more there's more reason why you should focus then on the profitability. You're just giving me fuel for my fire to say, well, then something needs to change, doesn't it? If you're living deal to deal, we've got to have that mindset shift, because right now, I bet you could probably live off 1% less, like in your business. So like, can we just siphon off 1% to pay yourself? Like if you're like living deal to deal right now, on the next deal, can we put a little bit away? I just want to get you in the habit. Because if I can start that habit, we can see it snowball into effect of like, okay, I see this now. I can only do X percentage right now to pay myself, whether that be a very tiny amount or you can start off a little bit more modestly. Wherever you are now is wherever you can start, like if it's very small, but then we're going to grow from there. That's why in the book, we give the target allocation percentages for you paying yourself. And it's like, that's a goal to shoot for, kind of like GPS. Need to install the GPS in there because right now you're not starting at the end goal. You're starting wherever you are on your journey. And then we've got to see, okay, how long and how far do we think it's going to be? And like, how can we navigate around some of those obstacles? So that's what I would rebut for someone who says, "Oh, I can't do this right now." It's almost like, well, do you like where you've been? And if you don't have a system for the cash, do you think it's going to get any better a year from now if you do 100 more deals or like whatever it is that you're trying to get to? Or did you just add a zero to your problems? And it's like just trying to give them that type of advice.
100%. I just had this conversation a week ago at my local RIA meeting with a group of people, because the majority of house flippers, landlords, real estate investors are horrifically bad at doing book work or keeping
Yeah.
it up to date.
Yeah.
And I've
100%.
had, people I've worked with over the years who their philosophy is, I got to make money and I'll worry about the books later. And
Yep.
that can be really frustrating if that's somebody that's within your actual organization, or if you're doing a joint venture with somebody or
Oh,
anything.
yeah.
Because I know plenty of people, and I'm sure you do too, that just jump into real estate joint ventures without vetting each other at all, without ever having these conversations about who's going to keep the books, what's actually going to happen if there's a negative that
Right.
comes about. And so I could tell stories for hours about just my own personal experiences, and you've got way more than I do. So clearly you can't give names and specific situations, but what's the
Yeah.
worst situation you've
Oh,
dealt with profit first, and how dire was it?
okay. Well, I'll tell you two different stories, and like I will redact the names.
Of course.
One guy came to us which he's still with us today, all these years later. He was one of the very first clients. So this is not Joey. So this is not Joey, but it's another
Yeah,
guy
we
that
do
came
not
to
have to
us.
redact Joey English from
Right.
Georgia.
Exactly. He's a great guy. He's doing well. He's got a great business. But this guy came with it to us and had 7 years worth of unfiled taxes and like had no books set up or anything. That was one of the scariest ones, especially right out of the gate. I'm like, I really want to help this guy, but it's like this is going to take a big lift. And it did. It took a big lift. That took almost a year just to get everything through and wrapped up for that was a nightmare. But thankfully, he was stuck with it and like put his head down and was like, okay, I'm going to get through this with you. Whatever you need, I'm going to get it to you. And that was like, there's secret of success takes two to tango here to get in there. I would say another one too that came to us that was really in the whole. This one is one of those sad stories where a guy came to us with his company, had a very decent sized company, came to us thinking he was in the black, like he was doing great, came to us and we were like, oh, let's get clarity here because the book's just like most people a mess. Like let's go through this, clean this up. And it turns out because this was in 2021, I believe, he had loans like the PPP and like the EIDL and like when we were going through all that stuff during COVID, and they had like covered up a lot of the sins of like, going negative on properties or like just covering a
Oh,
lot of the cash mishaps. And it turned out he thought he was in the black and positive, and he was $270,000 in the hole negative. I'll never forget that number because I'm like, I looked at it after our team had gone through. That can't be right. There's still stuff that you're working through, right? And they're like, no, like this is the end. It's all reconciled. It's all up to date. And I was like, oh dear God, I do not want to get on this phone call. And we had that phone call. It was a very tough conversation. Thankfully, he had assets like rentals and stuff like that. And I remember telling him, here's a plan. Now that we have it, we can get out of it if you want to. This is what we have to do. And he said, and he was on the phone, and I'll never forget this. He started crying because he's like, I've been building this portfolio for years, like this is what I've done. And he's like, I don't want to kill some of these, and I said, you don't have to sell all of them, but like, what's the ones that can at least get you back at least to even now while you still have your deals in the pipeline. But he went through a big restructure, like hiring different salespeople, going through, and like he went back into some seats just to get out of that hole. But that's when it was also one of those ones where the tax account saved his butt too, because he would always come to tax time and be like, okay, I've got this big tax bill, and boom, have to pay a bunch, whether it was property taxes because he had a lot of rentals, or personal taxes. So that's where setting up that account really saved his butt the other years that we were working with him, because then he didn't have to worry about that and was just really worried about knocking down the debt that he owed. And he got out of that situation by doing some of those hard things. And that's where I'm like, man, I hate situations like that. But it is kind of like when you're scared of the dark as a kid, but you turn on the light, or it's like monsters in your closet. If you open your closet, there's nothing there. It's like sometimes you just got to open it up and see what's going on, what's really happening. So that way we can attack it from there. I had someone ask me on a podcast this week. I was on another one, and they said, have you ever lost someone once they actually knew their numbers and they were just like, that's it, throwing in the towel? And I'm like, no, because usually we could go from there and give them either a plan, or they can say, okay, this stops today, whether it's the overspending or like the whatever it might be. So it's like, yeah, I could keep going on and on. Like you said, there's lots of stories, but those are the two that really stick in my mind. And then Joey's story too would be the third contender. He built it. He got himself out of it too, like through the profit first methodology. But I'll never forget him coming and saying, did more deals than I've ever done and lost more money than I've ever lost. And like Ashley, his wife, 2019, working in the business with him as transaction coordinator and like having seizures because it was so stressful. Joey doing the 80, 90, 100-hour weeks. And Joey, it's like he's a family guy, loves doing that. And
wow.
just really, wasn't working out. You see him today. He's fit, in shape, doing all these triathlons and stuff and not doing any of that stuff. So it's like there's just different ways people come to us with different situations. So there was two of the ones where it came with the worst numbers. And then one of them, like Joey, that was still his story was still one of the most emotional that I've gone through, because I sat with Ashley, I sat with Joey, and went through and just got everything they were feeling. And it was just, okay, what the heck is happening here?
And it's interesting how that plays into your vision, right?
Yeah.
Because I know Joey personally, and I know what his vision is for his family. and for his kids and everything that he stands for. And that's what really deteriorated his health. I don't even think it was the stress of the money. It was the stress of not being able to be with his
Exactly.
family when he should be with his family. And, Generations of Wealth, I say it on almost every show. It's not just financial wealth. It's the emotional wealth, the physical wealth, the spiritual wealth. All of that gets affected, especially when you're hemorrhaging money. And
Right. Exactly.
so, once you get people, I don't want to say turned around, but you shine the light on their
Yeah.
issues. What's the next step? How do you get them to be able to start scaling and get their profitability going up? What does that look like?
Usually, once we have the numbers, then we can pinpoint what the heck is going on. Is this a make issue, a spend issue, a keep issue? Because usually the keep is like where Joey might not have been too worried about the money or whatever it might have been, but he had tied that to, like, okay, family time. And sometimes that keep is really, what you're keeping either isn't enough, or if you're not doing anything, then it's affecting every part of your life. So it's like then going into it and saying, okay, if it's something bad or that guy was upside down, it's like building an immediate, like, okay, how do we get out of this hole type plan? Like an emergency evacuation plan to get him back on track. Or is it like the other guy, oh, we got to get through this, but once we're through the like filing the taxes and he's got that all taken care of for the last 50 years, or whatever, then we got to go into and say, okay, what's the next step? Where does he want to be? We like to do some of that vision as well too. What really is your vision? For Joey, it was family time and it was giving to charity. So it's like for Joey, the plan was helping him set up a giving account, or like helping him with the profit account. Let's talk about when you take a profit distribution, how are you going to, use that for your family? Those types of things, because that's why when we work with people, you get one CFO so they could get to know you a little bit better, your situation, what's going on, and what really matters to you versus just cookie cutter answers that are out there. So that's where it's like taking the tailored plan and putting that in place.
I love it. I love it. And obviously I'm very familiar with it, having worked with you personally. But I do want to switch gears a little bit
Yeah, sure.
because you made a comment earlier about everyone should have a mentor. And
Yes.
like the first half of my career from 2003 until about 2012, I was just myself, my wife, and closet investors, right?
Yeah.
We'd go to seminars, but we didn't really build a network. I kicked
Okay.
myself for not keeping all the business cards and stuff I had that first 10 years. Granted, many of them would be out of business by now, but the point is, how have mentors, masterminds, those types of things escalated your life and your business?
It's funny. I'll tell you a very real story that's happening right now with our daughter. So our daughter goes to a different type of school where they don't do grades, they do studios, and it's like they have badge plans, things like that, because they don't just focus on reading, writing, that type of stuff. They focus also on like emotional health and like networking, and like you got to 10 friends you've never talked to and like talk to them, and like in order to get to the next studio. Well, she got to the next studio and this week was her first week. Well, the transition's been a little rough, so she's been a little bit, like she's got a thorn in her flesh a little bit, where it's like it just anything hits it, and it's like the cat claws come out.
Mm-hmm.
And we've just been talking about, my wife and I, about community of, okay, we've got a great community with the school, but we should probably get deeper with some of these people and have some other people in our life where we can throw these ideas off of what our daughter's going through. So we know, number one, like, is there stuff that we could be doing or helping with during this transition? Is this normal? Like, are we going through the same things? And it's funny because as we were having that conversation, I was thinking in the back of my mind of how lucky I've been and how blessed really I've been to be a part of places where they've pushed me into networks ever since I was young. That first company, even though it didn't end the way we wanted it to, I got so much training and insight. And like that was where I went to my very first mastermind as a very young, early 20s, going to these real estate masterminds. And that was so eye-opening to me. I remember my first one coming back and just being like, holy cow, like this is a group of people that all think the same way and like read the same books and like all this stuff. And it was very encouraging from the very beginning. And honestly, right now, people say, like, for Simple CFO in our business, like, how did you build it? How did you grow it? I say, well, I built a network for 8 years in the real estate world, and I had great people, a mentor that I could call to say, is this good? A good idea for a business. And he said, not only, yes, it's a good idea. Well, can you come speak to my group? He's like, and I wasn't even looking for that at that point. It was just more like, what do you think about this idea? And it was more of that helped me along my way, where I would not be where I am today without the people in my life in those communities, and also my spouse as well too. Everything is just pointing us towards the communities that have helped us live that vision and values that we have. That's why we moved to the school that my daughter's in. Like, someone else from a different mastermind that I'm a part of, I heard he started this type of school in Oklahoma, which was a branch of a bigger network of schools. And so then we started researching that and literally moved from the Maryland area where we were near some family to Florida where no family is. And it's like, that's where we moved here because we believe so much in what we wanted for our daughter to have. And that's where community to me has been the ultimate difference. And I think if you want to go, what is that? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with people. And that is
Mm-hmm.
so true, because it is the people that you get around you. And even if you're a Christian, like the Bible says, iron sharpens iron. You got to be around people that will really get you to where you want to be, but also are going on that same path and will tell you how it is, what they're going through, and being real with you. Or they'll tell you, like, okay, like, you know what, see what you're doing. Well, you should stop that, and like being real. So it's like, and then the mentor is a little bit different than community. That's the one-on-one where they're going to get into your business. If it's a real mentor, a real coach, someone that really cares about you, and they're going to be like, dude, you should not be doing this. I just had a call like this with my mentor this week. I'm firing you from this position in your company. This person is going to take over now for you. And it was like, okay. It's like, but that's where you have to put people in your life that will make you uncomfortable. There's a great book called The Power of Ted. It's the empowerment dynamic, and it's about the drama triangle. Most of us lived in the victim, and we have persecutors and we have rescuers. Well, I want to live on the creator side, be creator, and surround myself with challengers and coaches. Those people in my life that are going to push me, or the people in my life that have been where I want to be and can give me a pathway there. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but I can't stress how much, like, it's impacted my life on a deep, deep level.
No, it's not long-winded at all. And that's exactly what I wanted to kind of get out of you, because our path has been similar to yours.
Yeah.
And, when we started the original Generations of Wealth voyage, that was one of those moments. It was mentors of ours that had put on this event for 8 years. We were on 7 of the 8 cruises, and they decided, it was time for them to exit. And we were voluntold, you're taking this over. And we rejected that for months. And we finally said, you know what? Yeah, we've never run a conference before. We don't know what we're doing, but we're passionate about continuing the work and passing on the knowledge to the next generation, just like they passed it on to us. That's really where Generations of Wealth started and came from.
Yeah.
And it's fun now because some of those same mentors are now a part of Generations of Wealth, and they come and speak at our events. And it's really humbling, but exciting all at the same time.
Yeah.
And as far as masterminds, the masterminds that we host, the REI Circle of Trust, we have people that come from all walks of life, all different parts of the country, different ages, different demographics, and everybody has very, very similar problems. And it has nothing to do with your net worth.
Right.
Some people think, well, higher net worth, you can buy yourself out of your trouble. Not really. I mean, you can have $100 million net worth and cancer because you didn't take care of your health.
Right.
And you didn't have anybody calling you out on it because they looked at you and said, oh, he's worth 100 million. I can't say anything to him because that person is above me. That's
Right.
bullshit. When you're with the right group of people, everybody should be able to call each other out with love, but, also with fortitude. And that's really the interesting part. And that's where we started meeting each other, was at not necessarily masterminds, but at real estate events, and started talking a little bit. And once we got to know each other more and more, it was pretty fast friendship for that reason, because you don't beat around the bush, and anybody that knows me knows blunt as hell. So,
Right.
so there's that I'm going to hold back on in most cases.
Yeah. No, and that's why I give a lot of credit to the group and a part of the people that have been in my life. It's just you got to surround yourself by the ones that really want to help you sharpen and also want to sharpen themselves too.
Yeah, that's the best point is, being enough to help, but also take help from people.
Yeah.
Because I would say, and I'll just speak for myself personally, oftentimes when you're at the top of the food chain in your organization, you take on all the stress, you take on all the work and
Yeah.
the sleep nights, and you don't have anybody to turn to. It's a lonely world,
Yeah.
and you got to have somebody to vent to, or you will lose that at least. So, well,
100%.
I appreciate the long-winded answer, because that's what I was really looking for. What's a question I should be asking you that I'm not?
Oh man, question you should be asking me, but you're not. That's a great question.
Thank you.
I
I do it on every show.
well then I would say one of the first things, let's just make it very practical of how do you get started keeping more of what you're making today? Because it's going to sound really ridiculously simple because we've already even hit on it, but I want to at least give you an action step from here. Like if you did one thing from this podcast, what would you do that can help you on a real tangible level? It would be setting up one different bank account. I'm not talking about, you don't even have to go down the entire profit first road. Like if you just listen to this and you didn't read the book, or you didn't go on search and go on YouTube and find the videos of what to set up, one different bank account, call it owner's pay, and start just putting a little bit away from everything that you're making. Because even though the money isn't usually what it's about and it's a symptom of the root problem, if we can start, it is though one of the things that we use as an excuse the most to block the real things that are going on in our life. So if I can really just help you get some of that out of your way so you can really focus on what is really going on, that's what I want to do. So if you could just set this up, get some good habits in your business, set up one account and like do 1%, do something small, like of every deal. You flow into that account, you just start to build that habit, because then all the rest of this stuff you're talking about, like if you're in survival mode all the time, you cannot think about what we're even talking about here most of the times. Like you can't think of the higher level stuff and thinking about, oh, where should I live? Where should I, go? What is my vision? All that. That's where we got to give ourselves breathing room. I need to give you breathing room so you can really say, okay, not only, and also sometimes too, we can't even see what our true potential is if we've never touched it. I've seen so many people like Joey. Okay, when Joey went down this path that first year, he gave himself a very realistic set of, like a number for properties that he could do in a year. Like the year before, trying to do a ton of properties per month, like 2, 3, 4, 5, like scaling up more than he'd ever done before. And then the next year in 2020, he said, I could do 5 to get to where I really need to be. So he slowed down though to speed up. He's doing more than that now. And it's like he has a great business, but it's sometimes just getting to where you can be right now that isn't going to also drain you and keep you in that cycle, that rat race we were talking about. And I would also say to get someone good around you, whether it's like if you're listening to this, you're listening to Derek, like, why are you not already in his circle of trust, or like in the cruise, or going on Derek is a straight shooter and his group is great and they have great success, success defined as like these people are growing. They're constantly growing, learning, helping each other, and getting closer to what, whatever it is that their purpose is. And it's like they're living that out every day. So I would suggest opening up the account and getting around someone that's really going to sharpen your axe.
Well, that is fantastic. And that's why I ask the question the way I do, because that pulls something out of you that you clearly wanted to say, you're emotional about, and you're excited about.
Yeah.
And it makes me look like a superstar. I just pulled something out of you that I wouldn't have even known the right question to ask.
Right. Yeah.
And
Well,
I'll take
great
it.
question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, as we kind of wind down here, David, tell everybody where they can find you, what they can do. I know that you've got a little giveaway, which they'll be able to get at TheGenerationsOfWealth.com/David Richter. But tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So if you go there, I want to give you the book. It's the ebook and audiobook of Profit First for Real Estate Investing, because let's be honest, You don't get much of this info of I make the money, what do I do with it? How do I keep more of it? So that's like if you want to dive deep into the profit first methodology and the setup and the system of your making sure you know where every dollar is going, that's where you can get it. But I also give a cheat sheet too, because I am you, the entrepreneur who's like, give me the 1-page version. So that way I can see if I can implement this and if this is really worth my time. So I give you that as well. I also give you a visual overview because some people are very visual learners. So like, here's the flow of money and how it should go through. And if you set up the system, it's just it's visual versus bullet point. So you get the bullet point one, you get the visual overview, and you get the actual book as well too. So you could start listening to it or at least pull the ebook up and see, okay, what do I need to set up? And you could go right to some of those chapters.
Perfect. So again, you can go to TheGenerationsOfWealth.com/David Richter to get that. David, anything else? So the name of your company is Simple CFO.
Yeah.
Right. Talk a little bit about what your company actually does.
So many people have bookkeepers and CPAs, and they love to look in the past. What has happened? Like where they're the rear view mirror. What I like to equate the CFO to is the cleaner of the windshield and the installer of the GPS. Because it's like you got to see where you're going. Because it's like those in the past help us to know, like, okay, here's kind of a base of where we're going. So we clean that windshield off for you there, so you can see what's going on. And we install a GPS for you too. Like, okay, where do you want to head? What is that vision and what does it look like? Because what we do is we make sure you have the right bookkeeper and bookkeeping system process, like who's putting the numbers in, usually taking that. Most owners wear the CFO hat. They just don't know what the heck they're doing or how to manage the people in their life. Number two is we implement profit first. So everything we've talked about here, that's where we help you manage the cash and where's your cash going to take you. So that's part of the GPS process. And then the other one is implementing a dashboard. So we've actually upgraded in the last year where we connect right to people's QuickBooks account and we pull in right into QuickBooks to a dashboard now where they can see in real time what's going on and giving them forward facing numbers, projections, where's their cash, that type of thing, running profit first from there. So that's what we do. We put a person on your team, and you might be thinking CFO, that's like ivory tower. Like, this is not a full-time person on your team. This is a part-time person that, it's cost effective to where you are. If you're newer and listening to this, go and get the download. Go and get that download and get the first steps. If you're on your first deal or looking to get into this, this is still a great foundation. I could tell you the story of one guy I had on my podcast where he said if I would have started this at the very beginning from the first deal, I would have had $5 million more in my account. Like now, that's where I'm so passionate about. Like, just start wherever you are, deal one or deal 1,000. Start with at least the first step. But then if you need extra help and like hand holding along this process, that's what we're there for as well.
Well, again, I've been a friend of yours. I've been a client of yours, and I've seen firsthand what you've done for people. And so I'm truly honored that you took the time to come on and help my audience today. So thank you for that.
Well, I'm honored to be on. I always appreciate when people have me on because like I said, like we both know, this type of stuff is not talked about a lot, or if it is, it's very boring and like turn the podcast off right away. So I just appreciate you having me on to be able to share the message.
Absolutely. And to the listening audience, as always, you can find everything that we've got available at TheGenerationsOfWealth.com. You can jump on the Generations of Wealth Facebook group and join that. Join the community, help us grow this, share it, and get out there and live your vision, love your life. We'll see you on the next show.
Thank you for joining us on another insightful episode of Generations of Wealth. May your newfound knowledge help you in leveling up your own strategies to get through the many obstacles to your money-making processes and bring you much closer to the financially secure life you truly deserve. Continue filling up your accounts and further polish your financial tactics by listening to more episodes of the podcast at TheGenerationsOfWealth.com. Because in your wealth building journey, there is no other way to go but up, giving you the chance to finally live your vision, love your life. That's all for now. See you on the next one.